We've all been in a workplace where communication has felt organized, fair. Your bosses wanted input and all that, and we've all been in jobs where probably communication wasn't the best. There wasn't a lot of trust. It was confused and it was very one-sided. The difference in communication practices usually does not come from the job itself, rather it comes from how the organization functions behind the scenes. Throughout chapter 3 and 4 of Press Books, along with the YouTube videos on system theory and organizational culture, the main idea becomes more and more clear. Organizations are not just a building with a bunch of employees doing said tasks. They're systems. I like to view it as sports teams, but in press books they say systems. They're systems that have cultures that rely on ethics to make sure communication is fair and trustworthy to build trust with an employee to said organization. When communication is handled the right way, people feel heard and included and engaged. When it isn't, people feel disconnected, therefore unengaged, therefore not as committed to their work. This brings up my first main point, which is the systems theory. Systems theory explains that organizations are made up of different parts that depend on each other. When one part of the system changes, everything is effective. That's how I view the sports team. Football, for example, if the quarterback and the coach aren't on the same page, it's probably not going to be a good drive. Every little thing affects the outcome. Everyone is a piece to the puzzle because every department, team, and employee is connected to others. According to the Pressbook, Chapter 3, an organization works like a living system that needs to communicate in order to survive. Pressbook's Chapter 3 specifically says organizations are open systems that depend on constant flow of information between people and departments. Again, we started learning about it when we had to do our last speech. Communication in the workplace is essential. The businesses that are successful, the organizations that are successful have impeccable communication where they allow their employees to be heard and heard and seen. The YouTube video on systems theory reinforces this idea that by explaining that a system only functions when its parts stay connected, feedback is shared, and the business and organization adjust together. When communication fails, the system cannot change and adapt. Problems start to bleed out instead of being solved. Blame starts to be shifted. This is why when leadership hides information from employees or people don't communicate across teams, the whole organization starts to feel like a disaster. Systems theory explains and shows that communication isn't just about talking, it's the glue that holds the organization together. Again, the best organizations are the ones that have free-flowing communication. No one is afraid to say anything. Everyone's voices are heard, everyone's opinions are shared and valued, and adjustments are always made. No one gets offended, everyone accepts constructive criticism. Going into my second main point, which is organizational culture. Organizational culture is what teaches people the right way how to act at work. Even when it isn't written down anywhere, culture shows employees how things are done in the office. Again, my biggest thing is you could have a set of rules in the office. No one is going to follow those rules just because they are written down. People follow the rules because they see other people following the rules. It could have things of do's or don'ts, and if everyone did the don'ts, people in the organization would do the don'ts because they lead by example. That's pretty much the point I'm trying to get. It's all lead by example for the most part. Pressbooks Chapter 3 specifically says culture is shared meanings, values, and practices that guide behavior inside the organization. The video on organizational culture explains that people don't learn culture by reading policies like I mentioned earlier. They learn it by watching how others act and what others' behaviors are rewarded or ignored. That means communication is how culture is spread across the organization. A supportive culture encourages teamwork, questions, and listening. You want balanced communication. Again, you want people's voices to be heard, seen, and respected. That's how you get those healthy work environments, those healthy work cultures. A negative culture might send a message that speaking up is pointless and not valued. Culture either builds trust or can shut it down. When culture is strong and healthy in the workplace, employees feel like they belong, understand their expectations are transparent, and they feel encouraged to perform work. When culture is weak, people are disengaged, disencouraged, and therefore uninvolved and unmotivated. Bringing up my third main point, which is power, voice, and ethics. Power in organization shows up through communication, especially when some employees are heard while others are ignored. Chapter 3 explains that communication shapes who gets influence and who stays silent in return. Chapter 3 specifically says communication creates and reinforces power structures inside organizations. This means that power isn't just about the job title. It's about who gets access to specific information and who's allowed to participate in the hearings of said information and said decisions. Chapter 4 connects us to the idea of ethics. Ethical communication is what keeps power from having full control. Chapter 4 says that ethical communication is grounded in honesty and transparency, as well as fairness and respect. When leaders share information and treat people with fairness, employees in return trust the organization. In terms of communication and trust in workplace culture, I like to view it as you're only as good as your leader. If you have a true leader who leads by example, influences communication, influences fair, respectful communication, allows everyone to have their own opinions on decisions being made, allows everyone to speak in the workforce, those are those organizations that really strive and really improve. Ethics is what protects employees' voice. It turns communication from instructions into participation. People don't want to be just informed and told what to do. They want their voice and input to matter. When employees feel like their input matters, they're more engaged, they're more motivated. They perform better, as well as the whole organization performs better. In conclusion, systems theory helped us understand that organizations survive through communication. Communication is the backbone at each organization. Culture explains how people learn and what behavior is expected in the workplace. And ethics is the voice of reason. If communication breaks down, there is no system. If culture is unhealthy, people copy that toxic behavior. And if ethics are missing, there's no trust in the workplace. These course materials make it clear that communication is more than just telling people what to do. It reflects power, employee participation, and belongings in the workplace. Understanding systems, cultures, and ethics helps explains why some workplaces feel supportive while others feel too controlling. And it shows how communication can be used to create healthy, motivational work environments.